All right, we're lucky enough now to be joined by Chris Stewart, the voice of the Crimson Tide. And before we get into the X's and O's of you getting in the booth and this officially being your job, I want you to take me through your life as young Chris Stewart growing up in this state and what Alabama and Alabama football specifically meant to you.
Well, at my youngest memory in relation to broadcasting, I always wanted to be Coward Hosell, because that's what I thought Howard Cosell's name was when I was like 4 years old. So that's what I went around telling everybody, was that I was Coward Hosell. But the thing that's been so cool with all that's happened, not just with being given the full-time position, but all throughout my career really, is seeing so many people that have known me the majority of, if not all my life, get the enjoyment that they have out of seeing me do this, because they remember little Chris Stewart wanting to be a sportscaster. And now I've had so many people that tell me, I remember you saying you were going to be the voice of the Crimson Tide. You used to pretend you were the voice of the Crimson Tide. It's amazing to think that it's actually happened. And look, it was incredible to get to meeting, to get to know John Forney, to get to know Paul Kennedy and become friends with him, and a guy that I lean on a good bit, and obviously working beside and being colleagues and friends with Eli for as long as I did. It's a great honor, and it's really cool. And at the same time, I feel a great responsibility to those three men to try to uphold the standard that they set. It's Alabama, so it would mean something anyway. It would mean a great deal. There's only a few places where this job would be matched. It's never going to be exceeded, but there are a few that are comparable, but it wouldn't mean as much to me because this is home. This is where I've always been. But to have the responsibility of following Eli, because I'm not replacing him, I'm following him, but also Paul and also John, men that I have so much regard for. I'm honored, but also feel the responsibility to do it right and keep the standard where they set it.
Now, you're new to this job full-time, but you're certainly not new. People have known you for a long time. You've been with the Crimson Tide Sports Network for decades now. So, a question I was thinking on the drive over here, is you undoubtedly must have had other opportunities in that time frame to take a full-time play-by-play job for a football program. Why did you say, no, I want to stay here and I want to wait my time because this one is so meaningful for you?
It's Alabama, and it's home. And you're right, there were some calls that were made to me, and would be considered in my profession very attractive, and I was flattered. It's not that I was offered the job, but I was asked to put my name in the hat. There was one time I did, not with a lot of effort, but there was one time over a decade ago that I did put together a resume, which is probably the last time I did, but I didn't pursue it, if that makes sense. I applied but didn't call anybody and ask them to make phone calls. I didn't do the full court press that you would normally do if you're interested in a job. But timing was terrible at that point in my life, and I really didn't want to leave. And I thank God that I didn't, with some things that I've encountered health-wise in my life. Had I been somewhere other than here, the end result may have been different. And when all is said and done, there's nowhere else I want to be. I may have done, there were times where there was a point where I made a decision. I may never get the job, and that's fine. I'm content with it. I'm blessed beyond measure in the things I've gotten to do. Even though I said I had those dreams as a small boy, and you work and you try to put yourself in position, I was at peace with whatever was going to happen. I didn't have to have the football job to feel like my career was fulfilled, and that I didn't need the validation that some people might with a job like this. I made the statement on more than once, I may do something else, but I'll never be anywhere else, God willing. And I'm so thankful and grateful that, yeah, I've gotten to have that dream job, and I've never had to live anywhere other than 45 minutes from where I was born.
Now, I know Jeff and Scott Forrester did an incredible piece when you were sick and your fight back. And we were watching some of that video before we came over here, just prepping for the interview. At your lowest moment during that point, was the potential of this moment, you being the voice of the Crimson Tide, was that a motivating factor? Was that not even in your lexicon? I'm interested, when you were really sick, what kept you going?
At the lowest point, I wasn't even conscious. But as I got better and was able to have somewhat clear thoughts, and you realize you're going to live, but what's next? And where I literally had to learn how to walk, I had to learn how to do almost everything again. You do wonder, am I going to be able to do what I've been doing, let alone advance in my career, so to speak? But what kept me going was my family, bottom line. And it's not a magnanimous statement that I love my family and I wanted to be here for them. Lord knows I've got my faults and not the best in my roles that I wish that I was, but I'm theirs. And having lost my mother when I was 17 years old, with her coming out of bypass surgery and knowing how that disrupted my senior year of high school. My daughter was starting her freshman year of college. My son was starting his freshman year of high school, and I had an 8-year-old son as well. Just knowing I may not be much, but I'm theirs, and did not want to. I was grateful, not that I had anything to do with living, but I was so grateful that God spared me and I could continue to be a father and a husband, and that they didn't have to go through, even though they went through a lot, in some ways went through more, they didn't have to go through the complete loss of me. And that drove me to get back, frankly, more than anything. There was a time in my life, Johnny, I would have said that I love my career. Yeah. And don't misunderstand, I'm extremely grateful for it, and so fortunate I get to do what I do, where I get to do it. But I don't love my job. I love my family. Again, there's a lot of areas I wish I was better in that, but a family's what I love. But I really, really, really like getting to call games. There's no question. And it wouldn't mean anywhere near as much if I was doing it anywhere other than Tuscaloosa.
Most people, when they take this job, they'll go into it, they've never called an Alabama football game before. You are of a unique situation with Eli's situation last year, that you were able to call road games. You were in Pasadena to call the Rose Bowl, and you've called some big stakes games. That familiarity with the booth, with the stage, you've worked with Tyler for years now. Yeah. Tom Sipe, obviously. Can you talk about how much more comfortable you'll be when the light goes on because you've been in these situations and you've already done the job before?
There's no doubt. Say it all the time, but another example of the evidence for me is God's timing is so much better than ours. To get to ease into it, so to speak. 2 years ago, I did not have the job. I was filling in for Eli. Filled in for him and was honored to be able to do so. When unfortunately he was sick, and filled in for him just as he and Roger Hoover and Jim Dunaway filled in for me when I had been sick the year before, or 2 years before, I think. So I was just the next guy up in that situation. But when Greg Byrne told me last year that I had half the games and that he said, this is not a temporary job, you are one of the 2 announcers now for Alabama football, that helped me to have feeling of some ownership of the position, and even though it was shared, but it was special to know that, okay, this is yours now. You're not a placeholder. And then extremely honored that when they decided there was going to be simply one, and that I was given the opportunity to do that. Grateful that I could do it, but really grateful that I was selected for the honor of being next behind Eli.
I remember being in driver's ed, Boston, Massachusetts, and it was a cop who was instructing us, and he told me, you're not even half good at something until you've done it for 100,000 hours. Now, I don't know if that's an over-exaggeration or not, but I want to know, in your broadcasting career, when you felt immeasurably comfortable and said, all right, not only am I doing this job, I'm doing this job well.
I don't know that there was a specific moment. There are times where you go, okay, I'm pretty happy with that call. You know, and you know this as a broadcaster, especially live situations, breaking news, things of that nature. Very similar to play-by-play in that you have no control over when the moment's going to come. You simply hope you tell the story properly when that moment arises. And that's what play-by-play is for us. And, you know, Coach Stallings, 5 plays are going to determine the winning and losing a game, but you don't know when those 5 plays are going to come. And when those moments occur, I had nothing to do with Alabama's defense stopping Texas A&M 2 years ago on the final play of the game at Bryant-Denny Stadium. I had nothing to do with that being stopped. But I spoke for all the fans, I've been told now, when I said, let's get out of here, because we all felt like we stole something. We needed to run. and got that win, and that's where that call came from. And I'm not going to say that was the moment that I felt like I belonged, but I think maybe for Alabama fans, that was, if they didn't already know it from 20 plus years of doing basketball and baseball, they knew in that moment I cared and felt like they did. Because winning is great, losing stinks. And sometimes winning feels so good because losing would feel so bad. And that was one of those moments. I don't know that there's an exact moment that comes, but I think for me, when I was told I had the Alabama basketball job, I'd always, I say always, for a few years I'd felt comfortable and confident in the progression of my career, in the work that I was doing. But without applying for the job, when I was told, you're our next basketball announcer, that was a great feeling, and extremely grateful. If that moment doesn't happen.
You're doing the Kalen DeBoer show now.
Yeah.
You've done the Nick Saban show for a number of years.
Right.
With him departing, the infinite wisdom that he has, not just about football, but about life and just how to be successful. What's something that you've taken from him in your relationship around Nick Saban the last 17 years that you will implement into your professional or even personal lifestyle going forward?
Man, there are so many things, and we all know there are clips that you've used for sound bites, and when he retired, there's probably a montage you put together of the Sabanisms, if you want to call them that. The preparation, the focus, the attention to detail, I can never match that. But it is the goal, and the understanding that you better prepare yourself for the moment. When the plane's going down, that's not the time to look for the parachute and try to figure out where it is.
As a historian of Alabama football, which you are, and specifically broadcasting, I want to know, what's your favorite call in the history of this program?
Wow.
No shortage of it.
Iron Bowl, Legion Field, Van Tiffin's kick, Paul Kennedy. It has distance. It's good. It's good. And then Doug Layton, and it's almost, you remember the old thing, dueling banjos? It was dueling that's it's goods. Because Paul'd say, it's good. Doug Layton, it's good. It's good. It's good. That moment, Doug, Van Tiffin has won the ball game. And Paul back with Alabama has beaten Auburn, and the state of Alabama is crimson. That was a phenomenal call, and 15-year-old Chris Stewart was hugging people that day at Legion Field. It was my first Iron Bowl to go to. And the kick was into the south end zone. I was in the north end zone. And watching it as it occurred, and then listening to it over and over and over and over and over again. And then to have people say, hey, Chris, let's get out of here from the A&M game, or anything else, that when what they're telling me is, I heard that and I'll never forget it, because it's the same for me with so many of Paul's calls and John doing the game, and obviously Eli in a Hall of Fame career. To know that I've got one or two of those. The best part of it, though, it's not about me. It wasn't about John. It wasn't about Paul. It wasn't about Eli. It was about the fact that something great happened for Alabama, and we get the honor of sharing that news with Alabama fans.
My final question is two-part. I want to get your raw emotion when you were told by, whether it was Greg Byrne or your bosses at Learfield, Crimson Tide Sports Network, that it was your job. And then when you put that headset on against Western Kentucky in a few weeks at Nick Saban Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium, what's going to be running through your mind?
I got to interview John Forney. It's when I met him for the first time. I'd been out of college less than 2 years, probably just a year. I'm working for the Over the Mountain Journal, and I'd interviewed John for a story that had nothing really to do with sports. But I was just trying to make a living, and I'm a general assignment guy, and I'm interviewing him for a social event where he was going to be heavily involved. And I finished the interview, and I did something incredibly unprofessional. I asked him if I could send him a cassette tape. And yes, I realize I've definitely revealed my age in saying a cassette tape, to ask him to review. But John said, absolutely, I'll be glad to. Gave me his address. I sent him the tape. He called me 2 months later and told me that he had listened, and he thought that I had a really good future, and I just needed an opportunity to keep working. I saw John Forney. It turned out to be the day that he passed away. And I had the honor of telling him that UAB had given me a chance to do sidelines for their broadcast, and that I would fill in on 2 games when they were being televised. I would be the fill-in guy for radio play-by-play. Ironically, the first game that I did was Western Kentucky, UAB up in Bowling Green. But I got to tell John that that was going to happen. And in that, what turned out to be the last conversation I had with John Forney, he said, I'm so happy for you. I'm so glad you're getting this opportunity. I just hope I'm where I'm able to hear you. So when I walked into the booth 2 years ago, and I put that headset on, even though it was filling in, I was just the placeholder for Eli, I remember distinctly thinking, John, I hope you can hear me, and I hope you like what you hear. And as I go into this new responsibility, I hope John and anybody else that happens to hear me that loves the Tide like I do will like what they hear.